Hi everybody, Bob Rasooli, Orange County, California. Today's topic is pressure relief devices, or PRDs, and specifically what you need to know about them for the API 570 exam. PRDs are a core part of safe operation in refineries and chemical plants. They represent the final safeguard against overpressure events that could compromise equipment, piping, and personnel safety. API 570 establishes clear expectations for how these devices must be managed within an in-service piping program. First, API 570 makes it explicit that PRDs associated with piping systems fall within the scope of inspection activities. They must be inspected, tested, and maintained at defined intervals. This is not optional. These devices are considered part of the integrity program and must be treated with the same seriousness as any piping circuit. The code requires that PRDs be serviced by qualified organizations with established quality assurance systems. These systems cover organizational authority, calibration of test instruments, control of repair procedures, documentation, and personnel training. The objective is to ensure that each relief device leaving a shop has been tested against consistent, verifiable standards and will function as designed under upset conditions. The aspect that most frequently appears in API 570 exam questions is testing intervals. The code establishes two default maximum intervals. For typical process service found in most refinery and petrochemical applications, PRDs must be tested and inspected at least every 5 years. For very clean, non-fouling, non-corrosive services such as dry air or inert gas systems, the maximum permissible interval is 10 years. The 5-year and 10-year figures are essential to remember. They provide the upper limits unless justified otherwise. It is important to emphasize that these are maximums. The actual interval should be based on service conditions and experience. For example, if testing demonstrates that PRDs in a particular service are prone to fouling or late opening, the interval must be shortened. Conversely, if documented experience confirms excellent reliability, the owner-operator may support extending to the longer interval where permitted. Another key point is the requirement for as-received testing. This means the valve is tested immediately after removal from service before cleaning or any maintenance is performed. The purpose is to capture how the device truly performed in service. If a valve only pops correctly after being cleaned, that tells you very little about whether it was reliable while installed in the system. As received testing reveals whether deposits, corrosion products, or other fouling were interfering with proper operation. This practice prevents a false sense of security and allows inspectors to identify services where conditions in the process environment may be degrading valve performance. Now let us consider how these requirements apply in refinery practice. In a fluid catalytic cracking unit, fines and particulates are common in the slurry systems. Relief valves in these services are particularly vulnerable to deposits. If one of these valves were only tested after being cleaned, it might appear to function perfectly. But if it were tested in the as-received condition, it might be clear that it was sticking or lifting late due to fouling. This kind of finding would indicate the need to shorten the test interval below the 5-year maximum. In another example, consider a reformer unit. Reformers operate at high temperature and undergo periodic regenerations. These thermal cycles and associated vibrations can place additional stress on relief devices. Even if the service medium is not corrosive, the mechanical demands can reduce reliability. After a turnaround or major repair, when valves are removed, inspected, and tested, it is common to discover wear or leakage that would not justify extending to the 10-year interval. In such cases, API 570 directs that the RBI or experience basis be reviewed and the interval adjusted accordingly. API 570 also requires that failures in as-received testing trigger further action. If a valve does not open at its set pressure, if it sticks, or if deposits are significant, the inspection interval must be reconsidered. The code does not allow continued reliance on the maximum 5-year or 10-year limits once reliability issues are evident. Corrective actions, such as shorter test intervals or additional cleaning and monitoring programs, must be implemented. From an exam standpoint, the essential facts to retain are these. PRDs are included within API 570's inspection requirements. They must be maintained by qualified organizations with documented QA systems. They must be tested in the as-received condition. They must not exceed 5 years in typical process service or 10 years in clean, non-corrosive service. And any failure requires reevaluation of the interval. The bottom line is straightforward. Pressure relief devices are critical safety components, and API 570 enforces strict requirements to ensure their reliability. As you prepare for the exam, focus on the 5-year and 10-year intervals, the as-received testing requirement, and the obligation to respond appropriately to any failures. If you can explain those points clearly, both on the exam and in the field, you will demonstrate a sound understanding of how API 570 governs PRDs.